Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back. A brief break. I was traveling a lot recently. Ashley's busier than ever, so things going on, but we are back with a new episode of Maximize Monday and have a old friend on with us now. If you're a long-time viewer or listener, you probably are already familiar with Cedric, but he's back to talk about some of the stuff with AI and then some of the other projects he's working on now that are not tech related, but a little bit more focused on the human elements of building your brand and getting your name out there and stuff like that. But Cedric, thanks so much for taking some time to jump on here with you. It's always a pleasure to have you on to discuss any and everything. You're always open to it, so I appreciate you kind of taking this time with us.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. And yeah, happy to jump into, what I can share and support. I know, I've been paying attention, especially on LinkedIn, the job market and then, the kind of mad dash and rush for all things related to employment is it's very real for a
Yeah,
lot of people. So I recognize that. So,
yeah.
I try to stay abreast of everything and, on top of research. And I'm just kind of a nerd in that way. A lot of this stuff, especially, when we do talk about some of the tech stuff. So
Yeah,
glad to
for
be
sure.
here.
For sure. Yeah. So, and I always shout you out when, we talk about AI tools because you were one of the first people that I think I really connected with that was really utilizing those. And this was, a couple years ago where things were still kind of fresh. There was a lot of uncertainty, stuff like that. And so you were always my go-to with that and kind of how you were early to adopt, how you can use AI tools. A lot of people were hesitant, concerned of what was going on and just kind of that unknown too, right? From the job search perspective is you don't really think of, how can I use specific AI tools to help me with this search? And since we last spoke this again a couple of years ago, things just continue to change, right? We've always said AI is not going anywhere. In fact, it's becoming more prevalent sometimes. So you can continue to resist, but there's still some stuff that's going on that can be beneficial, can be useful. And I know you mentioned that it's not the focus of what you do now, but over the past couple of years as things have evolved, are there any new AI tools that you found recently that when people do ask you about that, you encourage them to explore when they're considering using something else to help them with their candidacy with their job search?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some movement and shifts, I think. But the one thing to kind of, I think, lean into is that a lot of the same things that, have been recommended before, and things that we've talked about previously, even a lot of the processes and if we can during this conversation, I would really like to take a carve out a section to just kind of be real practical,
Yeah.
and I'll just give people, basically what they're being charged a lot of money for, in some cases. But what I've seen is, of course, related to that. There's a lot of tools, right? Everybody's kind of popping up with different stuff. We've seen that, and not all, but a lot are more so aimed at, kind of a capitalistic based, emphasis.
Yeah.
But there are some folks out there that are doing major things. One is Deja White with her career co-pilot. So actually, I think it was sometime last year we did a webinar together talking about career transition and supports. So I know that with her work, she's actually built out some proprietary tools that support with resume optimization or resume kind of diagnostic,
Mhm.
and even some of that career coaching component, and then supports with some of those more professional documentation. So and kind of guidance. I think there's a little bit more of a need for some of the hand holding
Mhm.
component, which is still, that in nature is very human. So I think there's an attempt really to have the technology do that. But again, I still lean into leveraging some of I guess at this point you want to call them old school tactics that I was initially doing, which still work pretty well. But yeah, so if there's any recommendation related to current things in the market, like I've sat down and kind of gone through what Deja has produced. I think it's amazing, and yeah, she knows what she's doing. So check out Deja White, career co-pilot, and her company is Break Room Buddha.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, we talked about some of the pain points of using AI in past episodes, mainly centered around finding ways to make that you still can maintain authenticity when using AI to help with creating messages, creating resumes, etc. Have you noticed anything new that people need to be aware of when they are exploring tools and resources that could hinder their overall experience?
Um, I wouldn't say necessarily new, but yeah, of course, with a lot of the influx of information being processed through a lot of the systems, um, you you essentially get a lot of streamlined outputs too, right? Like, so you get kind of stale language. We've seen this with like the inundation of the M dash kind of
Right.
fiascos and conversations and just a lot of those pieces where there's kind of the side eye always of like, where'd this come from? Right? Did you write this? Or so there's always a question of that authenticity and being able to lean into that because the language can become stale. We've seen the same, adjectives used over and over again. So thinking about how we can deal with that. So honestly, the same kind of I think recommendations reign true. Like, don't take the first draft of anything and just kind of copy paste and boop, drop it wherever. I've seen that go pretty roughly, even professional kind of standpoints with people who aren't doing job seeking at that point, but maybe they just pull, whatever email messaging and hit send, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean to have that or say that, right? So consideration for that. And then thinking about you know, leveraging even if we're going to use a tool, right? Like say you're using some resume optimization platform or something like that, which not to take anything necessarily away from those because there is alignment to, of course, the ATS, right? The applicant tracking system, which is what is really like has been the selling point for career coaches too. Um, I can optimize your resume so that it gets sifted through and funnels through this system that we don't necessarily know is this pie in the sky, you know, very grandiose idea that people aren't necessarily explaining as like, well, what does this system do? Um, but being able to take, a resume or something that's output from, one of those systems, and then either manually being able to go in, like using pen and paper or your own computer, your hands, and going through the language and making sure that number one, it's accurate, because I know we'll talk a little bit later about another component to that, but. Um, Also consideration for leveraging some of the tools, right? So you can leverage AI against and for AI, right? And what I mean by that is I use a resume, optimization platform. It gives me, hey, here's your resume. And this is LinkedIn can support. It has kind of AI embedded supports. Indeed, you can generate pretty much a whole resume using Indeed. But then going from there, taking that and then you can run it through like a chat GPT or cross-reference some of that language with Claude AI, right? Which are more so language focused and more so generative. So those things are in a sense kind of geared and tailored more so to help with crafting messaging versus some of the tools that are more targeted and specific for resumes, cover letters. So you can kind of think about how can I take what I've produced over here, right? This, document that might be kind of stale and might also look like somebody else's, and then leverage the other tools and, going in and I'll share I think some practical steps too about how you can do that. Like, how do I go into ChatGPT and turn it into the person that I would like to help me?
Yeah.
Um, and you get that done for I mean, essentially free. You want to pay $20 a month, you can. But I know that certain aspects of what we're talking about can become expensive and taxing monetarily and I mean emotionally,
Yeah.
mentally too. So if we can help people with some of that stress relief, then we will.
Yeah, that's a good segue to that next question because you've talked about, how you can manipulate algorithms to get the right things in front of you in the past. And I think that's kind of been the frustration we see out of job seekers too, right? Is, when they get these job recommendations to them and, job boards, LinkedIn, Indeed, a lot of times they're complaining that this has nothing to do with what I've done. This has nothing to do with what I'm wanting to do. And jumping from one career path to the next, that's going to happen, right? If you've done this for 15 years, the job recommendations they're going to give you are going to be aligned with that and not necessarily what you're aiming to do next. So how do you try to get them to start using those algorithms, get insight on opportunities based on what they want to do as opposed to what they've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is well, what I did initially, and I shared a video on this, and I shared this like uh how to optimize your search or something like that with in like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, you can start with the tools. Um, it's fine. You can go that route, but one of the precursors that I would actually lean into more so is I did a like in what do I call it? It's like an inventory. Strengths and interests is what I call it.
Okay.
And the practice basically is taking a sheet of paper, folding it in half, listing on one side all your strengths, which would like what are you amazing at? On the other side, what are your interests? And then cross-referencing where those things align. And then you can actually find opportunities or find roles that make sense there. Because I think what happens ultimately is um, people will be, either told about different, jobs or roles or opportunities or start doing searches and, sometimes, I mean, job titles and things like that can be also misleading.
Yeah.
Where to the point where like I'll be completely kind of, I think, honest in this and tell people what I've heard industry wise is like a lot of the job titles are more so for the organization and not necessarily for the outward people, right? Like, so in here, we understand what this means, but
Mhm.
you as the job seeker reading it, I mean, you got the description, but you won't really know until you get past the veil.
Mhm.
So that's one thing, which is, I think, starting out in the mental component of it is like, all right, well, first of all, don't get like overwhelmed or don't feel like this job title is bigger than me. I've seen some pretty major elongated titles that are like the job is pretty simple in nature, right? Like, so be mindful of that, but also thinking about how going from something like that interest and strengths and interest inventory into a tool and saying, basically, this is the stuff I've done, right? This is my experience. This can be things from your resume, or you can kind of spark it up conversationally. And one of the things I've really leaned into and talked a lot about with people is, and I don't know if this is the proper term, but this is what I call it, is persona prompting, which is basically leading in and turning, let's say you're using a free tool, free, large language model, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. Um, you go in because at that point when you're talking to it initially, it's basically sourcing all of its all of its understanding, right? Its whole reach to the internet or whatever. So we want to actually kind of refine that, retool it, and target a little bit more. I've done this with you. You can create a custom GPT or whatever, but if you're talking to just a base model, saying I need you to assume the persona or become a career coach in this industry with 25 years of experience and have helped thousands of people land jobs. Streamlines and kind of sets the basis of like, all right, and of course the model responds, okay, I am now, da, 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 and okay, like, all right, now talk to them, right? Um, and from there, what you can say is, conversationally, because some people you might not feel comfortable doing that. And one thing I had to learn was just because I had a very kind of, I don't know, serious or excited interest in a lot of what we're talking about doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is, and doesn't necessarily mean that everybody feels as comfortable using, technology, especially if you're talking about career professionals who are pivoting after 10, 15, 20 years even, right? In a certain job capacity.
Mm.
Um, so with that in mind, it's forget because everybody will say, "Oh, you got to learn how to prompt." Yes and no, right? Part of it is like, all right, you set the baseline, and then start having a conversation. This is what I've done. This is my background. This is my experience. What else can I do? It's going to continue on, right? The next thing is going to of course, prompt you even with questions, right? Can I tell you about how to do this?
Mhm.
What what do you need to, potentially study, right? What upskilling avenues can you take? What certifications can you get? Because we don't know what we don't know. And what I know is I don't know a lot, right? Ultimately, I know that I know nothing. So with that, we can start digging in and kind of pursuing. And there are like career coaching bots and things like that. As a matter of fact, like I mentioned, Deja White's career co-pilot, I think that's a component that is built in there and kind of framed in some of that guided approach. But you can do it conversationally. Another cool thing too, um, I like to kind of reverse engineer, which I think some of the AI like job search and like optimization platforms do. But what I've done, and I'm even thinking about for myself, and even I mean, I did this for my wife, uh, where you can basically take a job description, right, or a role that you find, and of course, run it through a system and say, hey, analyze this, right, based on my experience and see where do I match,
Mhm.
right? There are systems that will run this type of thing for you and give you a score and all kinds of cool stuff, but you can pull right directly from this and kind of source, right? Because what I'm looking at now more so is like content and document like generation and things like that is great.
Yeah.
But analysis is extremely important. And just think about the fact that this system can digest mass amounts of information and give you back the cliff notes
Mhm.
in a matter of seconds versus having to read through and figure out, well, what does this mean? How do I understand this? Right. And then from there, pull in that job description, right? Saying, this is what I'm thinking about. Am I qualified? Right. Does it make sense for me to even take my time to do this? Because how many times have, people probably reached out to you, Matt, Ashley said, hey, I applied to 100 jobs in the past week. I'm tired, right? Like,
Right.
so is it worth your while? Um, and then from there you can make adjustments, right? Then that's when you can adjust your resume and put that into a system and say, all right, cross-reference my resume to this job description or this job job title or whatever.
Mhm.
Is there anything that I can do to make myself basically look better as a candidate? So yeah, I mean, I thought of different ways, but I think going in and just starting conversationally,
Yeah.
this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I've done. Help me get to that next level. But
Mhm.
level setting with some of that persona prompting or using a bot that is specifically engineered to be a career coach, which I've set up and created with like Edu Hustle and that type of
Mhm.
thing for educators.
Yeah.
Um, you get more targeted output.
Okay, next question. What are some of the best ways to use AI powered tools to prepare for interview processes and questions? And I think you kind of hit on that just a little
Yeah.
bit, but I guess like if you want bullet points for it, because I mean it was some good advice, if.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the same way, right? Kind of what I mentioned before as far as the persona thing.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't necessarily have to be a career coach
Hmm.
type of level set. Turn turn ChatGPT or Claude into an HR manager,
Hmm.
right? Like turn it into somebody who's hired people or
Right.
whose intent, whose role on a day-to-day basis is plucking out qualified candidates and placing them, right? What questions would you ask me? And then, of course, if you're looking at certain job descriptions, certain roles,
Hmm.
I'm looking at, applying for this role, right? Or I have applied for this role. I've been invited for an interview. What
Mhm.
might they ask me?
Right.
I have personally supported and coached and helped people directly to actually just somebody who reached out to me who they're like they've just posted about something and they're like moving up in management and bringing people on board for their team, help them land that. But it was part of this was a big part of it, right? It was okay, I got, I got past the, the documentation screening and, the stuff that you can do behind the scenes. But
Mhm.
now I have to sit there and show improve in terms of competency. Um, and there's kind of two facets to this that I'll talk about. But again, it's going into that conversational piece of, okay, how can I leverage this tool to be that person, right?
Mhm.
That would be doing the hiring, right? How do I impress with the answers? And it will give you, not only just question, but also answers. So you mean you can produce a cheat sheet essentially, in a way, right? And have some awareness around that. And what I also would lean into, and this can be, AI or not, but don't underestimate the power of storytelling when it comes to interviews, right? Like
Mhm.
because it's more so about, tell me about a time when ellipses, right?
Yeah.
And that it's hard to use a tool to talk about your personal lived experience.
Mhm.
But what you could do is think about those lived experiences again conversationally with some of these tools and say, hey, how do I, you know, how do I make this a little bit more, give it a little more oomph or what have you, right? I've done this, I've helped in this capacity, I've led this team, you know, how can I shape and frame more narrative around this? And then you have those things in your back pocket. So when they ask you those questions, because they are going to ask you those questions,
Mhm.
um, especially aligned to the role, right? If you're going into leadership or there's something technical or whatever it is, they're going to ask you, tell me about a time when, you overcame this type of challenge or you
Mhm.
created this type of system. What was the outcome? Focus on the outcomes,
Mm.
right? One of the things I talked about with when I was coaching a lot of people, is, you really think about the interesting thing too, a lot of this stuff is like, I just learned a lot of it through stumbling through, right? Like, and that's kind of where everybody is. I want people to know that too. Like, and even a little bit like Matt, when you call me like when you say expert, I wince because I'm like, I don't say that. All right. But so there's kind of a component that to this that might be helpful in a framework. People can put this into a tool, right? So the way I view it with my background originally in chemistry, which is where I was going first. Um, I learned about all about chemistry, like chemical reactions. Chemical reactions, there's usually, a reactant, and then there's a, product, right? There's kind of cause effect,
Mm.
right? Input, output. And then a lot of that is driven by a catalyst, right? Something that pushes that thing along that makes it happen. What I tell people is you are the catalyst, right? So when you're telling these stories, you start with a problem typically, right? That's what your input is. We needed to increase revenue by 10%. Student success was, needed to go up by whatever on the standardized test. What did you do, right? Problem, step in, here comes the catalyst. And what was the outcome? If you
Mm.
focus on that function, right, that continuum in that storytelling, and you can leverage a tool to say, hey, I want to tell a story about how I solved this problem.
Mm.
Mhm.
It will give you that, right? And then you can at least talk through and have some of that narrative. And then the last component I'll mention too is um, be prepared, depending on industry, be prepared and comfortable with not talking to a person potentially, because video
Mhm.
interviews are a thing.
Mhm.
So be ready to be like you just like sitting on a Zoom screen by yourself like this, and the words appear on the screen. Tell me about a time, and you gotta you have to talk through it. So sometimes those human cues and things like that
Mhm.
are not necessarily going to be there. So I don't know if you rehearse for something like that or whatever it is, but yeah, just know that that's a thing I personally have seen, experience, and have some understanding of what those look like. But yeah,
Yeah.
really quick, one thing you said that that was very I would say informational that I didn't use prior to landing my role was being conversational with the AI tool. I never thought about doing that. I also, you said like build it to be a career coach or even the person interviewing. I never thought to use it like that. So that is my personal takeaway from this. Like, I like that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I kind of mentioned was you can like if you're using a lot of these tools, if you create a chatbot, right, you don't have to be extremely technical. Like I do not know how to write code, right? But that was my thing. Um, but I've been able to create bots because there are no code solutions.
Mhm.
So, for example, with ChatGPT, if you know are subscribing there, I'm not telling anybody to do that. I'm not affiliated with them at all. Um, but you can create, right? Like I've created an ATS optimization bot, right? So what you put in, resume, what have you, which I know we'll talk about some of the ethical components of that. Um, and as far as the output goes, there's a little bit more of an emphasis in focus, right? So you don't have to do that persona prompting, and it is what you designed it to be, right? So if it's an ATS bot, then it knows everything that you give as far as output is supposed to be ATS aligned or optimized content that a hiring manager will see, right? So it's level set. Um, but with having that, you don't necessarily have to have the conversational pieces. But again, you can leverage both sides of it. And just realizing that, again, like I think I mentioned my wife, I ran her resume through this because I think it's also important to have like testing and proof of concept of a
Mhm.
lot of these things. So be mindful of some of these platforms. That's why I can say like, oh yeah, Deja White because I know her and like the things that she's done and there's proof there. Sometimes things can get inflated, but like I ran my wife's resume and she put it out and I knew it worked because she got a call back in like 2 hours. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, well the system works, right? Like, and then you use it for other people, but again, it's being mindful of that, but also being open to tweak, right? And shift and change. So yeah, a lot of it is nuance, but much of it is kind of the same in a way. It just kind of, I think the aesthetics of things kind of look different, but a lot of the background is seems pretty similar to me.
Yeah. Can't argue with those results either. 2 hours. It's it's quite a
I
turnaround.
surprised myself. It was cool, but I'm also like she has amazing experience and she's a wonderful person. So naturally,
Yeah.
like I'd hire her. So
Sure. So before we started this, you've been talked about how you've been trying to get the human element back into things. I think
Mhm.
the next question is probably a good time to cover that because I think in the past we've talked about concerns of being over reliant on AI tools, right? And we've talked about the copy paste thing and where you're not even reading. And sometimes I think I told you this where I would talk to people about stuff that was on their resume and they'd be like, huh? So like not even like having like the cognizance to review what the AI tools were creating for them. So, as you're looking to put the human element back into these things, how do you coach people to be cautious of overutilization and, be aware of being themselves as part of this and doing their own thing and not just saying, okay, this is created for me and this is all I use now.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing is, and again, I guess it'd be a little bit different if you're using a system that is, created intentionally
Mm,
for like resume output.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm really mindful of inputting personal information.
Yeah.
Um, even my own image and likeness, people are always like, "Oh, your information is out there anyway. You're on social media." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, but this is a threshold where I kind of look at it like I'm willingly doing this
Yeah.
and I'm cognizant of it. So if and when there is an issue, that company or entity can say, "Well, you knew what you were doing. You're the one who uploaded it," and versus you stole my image and put it into a marketing campaign, right? Like or whatever. So that's my rationale. But with that, if you're going to, like, for example, with the ATS, the bot that I set up, I have run like I've even my own resume like through it. But what I simply do is just remove the personal information from it. Like it's we don't need to optimize your phone number. Like, like, it's fine. It works, I'm sure, right? Uh, your email address is the same. So it's really focusing on the content sections of like I want my professional summary to be better. Um, you know, all of my work experience, formatting, right, structure, language, uh, my certifications, is this, does it look right, right? And those are the things that you want to tie into. So I think some of the over reliance pieces, that's where you end up with issues regarding kind of what you were alluding to, Matt, which is like the inflation of work experience and background, and because if you allow, right, that to happen, I've personally seen it myself, where it will tweak things. Where for example, something on my resume says, back when I worked in DC. I was a district course chair in math, so I did math professional development for the district, and some of the content that I produced in English, of course, for me, uh, I also worked with a team who then took that and they translated it into Spanish because, of course, we have Spanish speaking teachers and students. Um, AI has I've seen it take that and basically turn me into bilingual as a professional, right? Like, and be that as it may, like I my wife and I do well enough in Spanish speaking countries to where we don't get lost. Like we can order, but by no means would I claim myself as bilingual, right? So again, it's the inflation of, because the goal here, especially when using some of these larger models or what have you, some of the general stuff, it realizes and I think understands. It's weird to talk about technology as realizing and understanding. Um, but that the goal is to make you appear to be the best possible candidate it can, which is the emphasis, right? But we can also put guardrails in limiting like parameters on that.
Mhm.
So here's a very simple thing that I think people can do. It is just tell it use only the information provided. Do not fabricate, right? And then from there it'll be like, oh, okay, you just want me to stick to the script. Like, yeah, like don't give me like a whole other certification that I do not have, right? Like, because if you tell it optimize, it's gonna be like, oh, okay, well the job description is this.
Mhm.
So you need this, this, and this.
Mhm.
I need you to know how to use Figma and all these other, like now all of a sudden, you speak Tagalog and write Java. It's not true. So it's focusing on and supporting that alignment, but just being mindful of you know um, taking your hands off so much.
Mhm.
I think is the concern. I mean, yeah, and then also just kind of sharing too much. Like a lot of things is not they're not really necessary. Um, so yeah, just being mindful and cognizant. Like I just try to be careful.
Sure.
Okay. We talked in the past about how people can use AI to build their network and their brand on social platforms. And it seems like some platforms are starting to build their own AI tools to navigate the process. What are some of the best ways to use these features, job boards that have the option to accept AI support?
Um, well, first I'll preface this by saying I've said this often. Networking is contact sport. Right? That's first and foremost. So if you're kind of leaning into or depending on a tool or a system or a robot to sync you with humans that can then lead you into new opportunity. Um, you might want to rethink that a little bit, right? And I know it's difficult too because reaching out to people in their DMs and stuff like that, that's not always fruitful either. Um, but what I've found to really think about here is that just some of that is limiting, right?
Mm,
But I think there are some tools and platforms that they offer kind of more like wizard support,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which I think is helpful, right? Where you still have to do something and it will give you kind of, recommendations, right?
Mm,
You want to do like even something as simple as like I know on Indeed, right? If you upload a resume or something like that, like at the end of it, like some I mean, I think some of these are just like really they're overlooked in terms of automation because it's not this like amazing thing, but it'll ask you like, hey, do you want to make your profile open and like have other people be aware? And then also just thinking about things like um, the automated job notifications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Via email. Because what those things do is they say, hey, I think based on your experience, it looks like you're aligned to this. You'll get those via email,
yeah.
right? Like you didn't have to do any work for that, but imagine, right, where that system is saying, oh, you do this, this, and this, and this. These jobs are available and they align here. You should look at these. I would say just start there even.
Mm,
And then the cool thing about a lot of these platforms, especially like LinkedIn, is for many of these organizations and companies, even the people, like you can also do background research. And I mean, you can leverage some of the tools and do this, right? But
yeah.
you know, LinkedIn has company pages,
Mm,
right? Go to those pages, tap on the people tab, and you can connect with those people. Now, here's where you could leverage some of the AI is if you're not comfortable and you don't really know what to say,
Yep.
right? I'm gonna go into one of these tools. Hey, listen, I'm doing cold outreach, trying to get aligned to this role or this company, and you don't even have to put in necessarily like a lot of information. Like if it's a company, a nonprofit, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you can just take their website link, like the URL, and say, I'm reaching out to people that work here. Everybody, the beautiful thing about a lot of these platforms, well, not platforms, but the like people's websites, right, is that no company or human or person or whatever, right? No website is going to showcase the worst of what they offer. It's always the best,
yeah.
right? If I have a company, my business, it's going to be like my website is going to be like, here's our mission and vision and our values. This is kind of, I don't know if I'm telling people to cheat, but I'm telling you to cheat, right? I
Mm-hmm.
once heard, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So if you leverage that, right, take that company email or website and say, I'm talking to people here. What it will do is pull that and say, okay, well, this is what's important to them,
Mm,
right? Here are their core values. All right, based on this information, can you generate or help me craft introductory messaging to the hiring team, to people who work in this department? And then, of course, you can go into a LinkedIn and say, oh, Ashley works at this place. Let me send her a message. Hey, I see that you work here. I'm really aligned in the value of whatever, right?
mm,
Pulled directly from the website. So it gives some insight of genuine interest, but we're also thinking about the fact that we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're searching, so we need to be assets to wherever we're looking,
yeah.
right? Nobody's hiring you just because they like you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe, but ultimately, if it's a business, they're hiring you because they think that you can provide something of value that will grow that business.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can prove that, then that typically works. But how you do that is you take genuine interest in what's going on because then they say, oh, wow, this person is aware of, what we've done, our product or whatever. And this is how they're leading the conversation by talking about value, not just saying, hey, I just saw this job is open. what's up? Y'all hiring? Like,
Right.
like that, that's not going to do it. So it's strategic,
Mhm.
in nature. And, you know, somewhat of, unfortunately, we have to be that way now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, because, I mean, you got to remember too that you are competing against a lot of other people,
Mhm.
many of whom are going to be using a lot of the same tools and platforms and systems that you are.
Yeah.
And they're also competing against and running up against the same intake systems, right? So my resume, Matt's resume, Ashley's resume are all going through the same ATS for this company.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily even know how they decipher and end up with who they select.
Right. So the last question is one we've talked about before, and I wanted to rehash because I think it's an important one because it's not always top of mind when people are using AI tools. Ethical considerations that they need to take when putting information into those systems, and the biases that candidates should be aware of that come with using an AI tool. And so, what are some of the ways that you talk to people about if you're going to use an AI tool, be prepared to potentially face this, or make sure that you're doing this properly so that you're not running into bias from the AI tool itself.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say is this, and this is AI, this is really anything tech related, social media. If you can't pinpoint the product, it's because you are the product. And what I mean by that is there's an extreme value placed on data,
Mm,
right? Data's gold, right? We talk about the gold rush. Then, I think I've had conversations with people a lot and kind of always made this reference of like, who got rich during the gold rush, right? It was the people at the base of the mine selling the shovels. It wasn't the people going up there digging.
right.
So if I can sell you the shovel, right, which means I'm taking in all the data, taking in all the information, that's where all the value is being sourced, right? So thinking about that because, and you can use AI for some of this. I've done it. You can actually go into a lot of these tools and ask it, how are major corporations using our data for revenue? And it will tell you.
Mm,
And it will name them, right? Here's how. I'm not trying to get sued. X company is right using data. So knowing that, right, first and foremost, because again, data is extremely valuable. So thinking about what you're sharing, and how that's being used and how that's being leveraged. The second thing you mentioned, Matt, is algorithmic bias.
mm,
And I think a lot of this is just more so in research and I think looking at organizations, groups, and people who are and have been already doing the work and kind of blowing the whistle on a lot of it.
yeah.
Two that I would highly recommend people reading and becoming aware of. First, will be, and this is not in any particular order, they work together in a lot of capacities. Dr. Joy Bolamwini, her book, Unmasking AI, as well as there was a documentary that came out. Um, I can't even think of the name of the documentary. I think it was on Netflix at one point. With her organization, she has an organization called the Algorithmic Justice League, and they focus heavily on algorithmic bias, across different differences, right? Race, gender, all those types of things. And then also Dr. Timnit Gebru with the Distributed AI Research Institute. So looking at what their work has said, because even there's things like right now, awareness around even with travel, right? When you go into an airport, right? And now that facial scan, and there was a report that came out from Dr. Joy and her organization that was basically like they did a study of like basically asking people, hey, if you traveled recently, did they even ask you permission to scan your face, right? Like because that is actually a thing, right?
Mm,
Um, so there's just consideration of that, and then of course that goes into a lot of these tools and systems where um, people have seen like the changing of their appearance if they upload an image or something like that, which I mean I just don't get into either. Like I remember the action figure craze. Remember everybody's doing the
Yeah.
like I that was like one of the only I guess you call it viral posts that I probably had, which is kind of funny because mine was an action figure box, but it was like the action figure was gone, like I busted out of the box and it wasn't there because I didn't upload an image. And I was like, I'm not doing that, right? So kind of like to kind of like poke fun a little bit, but yeah, just I think being cognizant of that, right? And then there's also I think one of the things we mentioned before, which was more of the like misinterpretation and like the inflation of information, where it basically turns you into a person that is ideal for like a job or whatever, but it's not really you, right? And I've seen a lot of joking posts on LinkedIn about like to be like a dog walker, and it's like some extensive summary or
Mm.
breakdown of what that job is. It
Yeah.
takes care of canine companions, and then the whole kind of elongation. But so be mindful of those things. The one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention also for just for research purposes for people is um, I mean I'm a scientist at heart, so the environmental effects also on what we're doing,
Yeah.
being being cognizant of that, like I would say to kind of start look at what is going on, has been going on in Memphis, um, with this major lawsuit happening or has been happening, with data centers and things like that.
Mhm.
And people want to argue it, and my whole thing is I just kind of sit in the middle because you have opposite ends of the spectrum where you have the doom and gloom, Terminator, it's over, it's coming to get us. And then you have the other side, which is again like more propped up based in capitalism. Let's all get rich, and it's like it's somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
probably. But being mindful of what effect and impact you are having. So even with that, just when you're using it, just being intentional, being mindful of the prompting and how often you're using it. Because again, like thinking about you know, things like the effects on like water supply
Yeah.
in Texas and that type of thing is recent and prevalent. So just just have awareness.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think those are the big things. And just know that you're not the only person that's using it or,
Right.
you know, trying to elevate. So think about what it is that you're doing differently in comparison to everybody else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I hope that helps you.
Yeah.
Sure. So before we let you go here, I always like to give you some time because I know you've always got projects in the works, and you create a lot of great content on your own feed. So where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? And what are some of the things that you'd like to highlight in terms of what you put out there that you think would be very beneficial for watchers, listeners to dig into?
Sure. Appreciate that. Well, yeah, you definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, so you have Cedric Scott Jr. And then I don't know, what do you call that? A little title-esque thing is, Master of Education, M.Ed. Uh, my big pushes right now are really aligned more so to with STEM education, even, dare I say like career development and workforce development and support. Um, Major campaign right now is year 5 of the STEM scholarship that I created in memory of my mom,
Mm.
the Julia Elizabeth Legacy Scholarship, which is a fund as well, so people can donate directly to that. Right now, we're looking at, um, I think we're been going for about 2 weeks now. Already have like 200 applicants.
Awesome.
Uh, Goal is always at least $1,000. Ultimate goal is full ride scholarships. So, not, we'll think about that in the future, trying to grow it. So yeah, looking for support there. And that's set up on a nonprofit platform called bold.org. So if people want to donate and not necessarily buy anything from me, it can go directly there. That platform is a 501(c)(3), so tax deductions if you want to donate to that. Um, Other than that, stem1000.com. I've been producing a lot of different books, resources, and then kind of just pulling in the things that I've been producing. And on top of that, still always kind of moving and shaking in terms of consulting, whether that's, AI related stuff, education, um, you know, professional supports, speaking engagements, doing a lot of different things like in that world. So, but other than that, just keeping things moving, being happy as a dad and husband, and we got 3 dogs, so I stay pretty busy.
Yeah,
But yeah, having a good time, enjoying it, and just trying to do what I can to help people out.
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We'll probably do this again, talk more about STEM career development too, because that's something I'm buy into with my current role. So definitely want to have you on back again here in the near future. But thanks again for your time. Everyone who watched to listen, thanks so much. Hope you got some great insight out of this. I know I did. So talk soon. Have a great week.
Thanks.